Okay, so I'm Nicole, and this is a video for task 3. It's going to be brutally honest, but yeah. So, although I did pretty well, I think, in the situation that I discussed earlier with the small boy that was having seizures, um, my usual coping strategies, probably not really coping strategies, but my usual coping strategies consist of, when possible, but isn't really possible when I'm in the ambulance, um, maybe when I get home, um, I like to have a cigarette, though it's not very good for me. I've quit several times, but when I'm stressed, I tend to go back to having a cigarette. I like to eat, and often just after the incident, I cry and self isolate for a while, um, and probably overthink stuff and rationalize uh, what happened and what I could have done better, and yeah. And then usually after, this isn't all the time, but usually after the fact, when I've had a bit of a meltdown as such, I'll then tend to be hyper happy and I'll pretend nothing's wrong, and I'll go out and kind of make out to everybody that I'm really happy and try make up with it, make up with maybe bouncing around and being too happy, and then yeah, so that's kind of to maybe just try put it to the back of my mind and pretend to myself nothing's wrong. And then after that, I tend to go back to my sort of overthinking everything and trying to rationalize it, what I could have done better, what I did wrong, depending on the event, maybe why it happened. Um, yeah, I tend to overthink things, and often I'll have a cry, depending on how stressful the event was. But then, with constantly trying to rationalize and try remedy the situation and understand it, I often become very upset and frustrated. So that kind of backfires also. Um, so those are sort of my ways of coping with things that doing these reflections and stuff I kind of realise aren't really ideal, and I've sort of overthought this. So now I'm more aware of how I cope with things, which probably isn't ideal. I've never suffered with alcohol or substance abuse, although a couple of times when I was younger, I did drink a few times and that ended badly. So that's not for me. I do hear a lot around station about people drinking, and that's their way of stress relief and being happy and making joy out of their life, and I can fully understand that and I don't judge, but it's just not me. So I probably don't deal with things properly, so they tend to pop up quite often in my mind, like that incident that I went to, among other incidents on the ambulance. They do tend to pop up from time to time, but I sort of put them in the back of my head and try not to think about it. Although I had a little chat with my mentor with that situation with the seizing child, I don't usually talk to people. I struggle to talk about my feelings, and by the time I do talk, it's too late, or I've kind of been forced to because it's obvious something's wrong. But I'm also, my downfall is honesty. I'm too honest. So if somebody is noticing something and ask me a question, I'll quite often blurt stuff out that's probably not appropriate for the time and maybe the wrong people. So then that becomes another issue, which I tend to ponder on about, and shit, why did I tell them that? Like, that wasn't ideal, but it was sort of, I got asked a question, so, and then sometimes when I do that, then I self-isolate again, because I'm thinking, oh, why did I do that? But it was simply because when I get asked a question, I answer it. So, eventually I often either rationalise to an extent where I feel that it's okay, or come up with a solution for myself and what I'm going to do better. But yeah, when stuff pops into mind, I tend to put it behind me. So my coping mechanisms probably aren't ideal. Eating too much is not ideal, especially when it ends up being popcorn and chocolate and ice cream and everything else. Smoking is quite clearly bad for my health and could have implications for the future, so I will try again to give that up. I need to look at talking to people and opening up more honestly, maybe asking more questions. When I spoke to my mentor, I sort of gave him a brief, I felt, really upset by that. Don't know if I'd make a good paramedic because maybe I take things to heart too much, maybe I'm too soft, and that's good. Like, he made me feel really better. But I probably should have asked him some questions and maybe told him a little bit more of some of the things that really got to me in that situation, and maybe also discuss the driving thing, because I was pretty uncomfortable with that, and I probably I thought about asking him what I should have done in that situation, but yeah, because I was unsure. Yeah, so I think we go on to look at things we could do in the next portfolio. But yeah, so that is kind of a summary of how I at present deal with stuff. Although my outlook on that's kind of different after doing these portfolios and reflections. So yeah, thanks for listening.